my pleasure this morning to introduce Eric Hall to you, who will be delivering the morning message. And I thought maybe I should wear a name tag when I preach next week. I've been slacking off so much lately, but we've actually got our pastoral health retreat starting tonight and going Monday and Tuesday, the final one of 4 that we've had over the last couple of years. And so Eric preaching this morning allows me to be a bit more present in that and not have to cram a full week's worth of thing into just a few days this week. So I appreciate Eric being willing to be here this morning. Eric is, he's the Director of Church Relations and Communications in the FEC office in Fort Wayne. He served prior to that for 15 years as a pastor, and then also for 15 years in the digital marketing world. And if you think, man, how can God ever bring 2 things like that and bring them together? And here he is in a role, I'm not 6 or 8 years, I don't know how long you've been in that role now. 6-ish years he's been serving in that role, but it's cool to see how God takes 2 things that seem so different and brings them together into what he's doing now. So Eric's going to continue in our series through John's Gospel this morning. I appreciate him doing that. So why don't you come lead us through chapter 18.
Well, good morning. Yep. But one thing I get to do is this, travel and visit churches. I'm in a church about once a month that's not my own, traveling. So I take photos of you guys. So, and I keep the photos, so I'm not just fumbling around on my phone. Sometimes when my wife can't be with me, I'll text it to my wife to prove I actually did something on Sunday morning, things like that. So so just smile. Yeah, here we go. Let me go to the wide angle and 2 photos. There we go. Okay. I do keep them. I use it to remember the churches. Now I'm just pulling up time. So thanks for letting me engage in that. One thing, my Bible had literally fallen apart. And so I have a new Bible this morning. So that's both good and bad. I mean, it's good. We get a new Bible. It's bad because I don't know where anything is in it. My previous one apparently didn't have the red letters for Jesus. Now it does. So it kind of, I don't know, it's just, I'm not used to it. So it's all new. So we'll be picking up in John chapter 18. A little bit about me. Aaron's right. I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I drove 4.5 hours to come to church this morning, so I was hoping it was worth it. It's not true. I came in last night, and I'm spending a couple days here. I got some stuff for the Thrive retreat for Aaron and a bunch of visits. I'm driving down, I think, south to visit another church elders tonight who lost their lead pastor, and so just helping them and do some stuff. He resigned, didn't literally lose him. So I'll be doing some stuff like that. A little bit about me. I've been married for 35 plus years to my wife, Becky. I was in high school when we met. We've been married all that time. I have 3 grown kids, Abby, Rick, and Drew. I have, all 3 of them are married. The older 2, Abby and Rick, live in Fort Wayne, where I live. So we get to see them on a regular basis. Our youngest, Drew, lives up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which from Fort Wayne is about 2.5 hours up near Lake Michigan. If you're following, it'd be here. This is what Michigan people do. So, I have 3 kids, grown, married, and I had the privilege of officiating at my my youngest wedding a year ago, so that was a treat. It's a lot of fun. I anticipated it being difficult to get through because it's my youngest son and the emotional of marrying him. What I didn't anticipate was the thing that would bring me the biggest emotion was seeing my soon-to-be daughter-in-law. When she came, they open the doors. If it was here, you have a bride there, they kind of open the door and she walks down the aisle. The first thing I said was, I'm going to need a minute. And it was great. I have 3 grandkids. My daughter has 2, Benji and Milo, who are turning 4 and 2 to round up. And then my son Rick has 1 named Beckham, who is 1 year old, give or take a month. I get to do this for a living. This is what I do. I have a great job because I get to visit. I'll be hanging out with you guys after church. You have a meal, so I'll be staying for that. Feel free to say hi and talk to me a little bit. So So that's me. That's a little bit about me. If you have your Bible, open it up to John chapter 18. But before we jump in, let me ask you this. I want to kind of give an introduction, see if any of you are kind of like me. Have any of you binged watch a series like on Netflix or something where the series drops and you just power through it? I don't mean you just watched it. I mean you kind of binged it, where you stay up way too late, you power through to the ending. Here's how it works in our house. My wife and I really do enjoy watching TV. It's kind of a thing we do together. I don't have kids at home anymore. I don't have to worry. I mean, I worry about the content for myself, but I don't have to worry about my kids, things like that, right? And here's what we do. I'm sure none of you do this, but we pick out a series we want to watch. My wife and I have opposing schedules. I work during the day. She works in the evenings. She owns a dance studio. She teaches little girls how to do dance, ballet, and stuff like that. Has she has her production coming up in about a month. So we pick out a series we want to watch. Maybe it has like 10 episodes. So we think, great, we'll watch one episode a week, right? We aren't doing a lot on Tuesday nights. She gets home a little bit earlier on Tuesday nights. Classes don't go as late, so we think we'll watch an episode a week on Tuesday nights. And it'll get us through, give us something. Everybody's with me, right? But then something happens. Usually if it's 10 episodes, it happens around 7 or 8, something like that. And we give up the one episode a week, and we binge through. We stay up till like 1 a.m. watching all the episodes just to get there. I mean, we don't even care that the next day we're both going to be utterly exhausted. But we binge through. We don't care. We have to get to the end. And the question is why? Because you see, when I see the end coming, when I see that end coming, I've got to get there. Like I lose my ability to wait anymore, and I have to get to the very end. And so I do whatever it takes. I stay up till 2 a.m. knowing that 6 a.m. meeting I have tomorrow morning is going to be worthless. I see the end in sight, and I have to get there now. Matter of fact, on an episode, a series like this, if I'm watching 10 episodes and I'm on like episode 7, there's all these loose ends, right? You have no clue what's going together, and you just can't wait, like, how are they going to tie this all up? And so the last 2 or 3 episodes, more happens in the last 2 episodes than has happened in the previous 8, right? Because they got to bring it all together, and they are cramming in all this stuff to tie up this storyline. And that's where we're at in John. John chapter 18 is this kind of what I call, we've reached the bingeable moment of John. And now John's going to cram everything into here. We've officially done it. Things have been moving along at just kind of a fine pace, but starting in chapter 18, we're closing in on those final moments, and John is cramming everything into these last little bits. John just finished this upper room discourse, John 13 through 17, those 4 things he's praying, right? And he's praying for his disciples. Those 4 chapters are only found in John, that little discourse, that little prayer. And now John turns the corner and moves into the final stage, what I have in my notes calling the bingeable phase. It's an official theological term. I learned it in Bible college. The final 4 chapters. And in John 18, we have this incredible time of pressure and peril. We have armed guards, we have confrontations, we have trials, we have people cutting off ears, we have people falling down, we have people calling down curses on themselves, all in John chapter 18, this incredible pressure. And in the midst of this pressure, trial, and stress, there are kind of 3 decisions that get made. Kind of this little 3-act play, if you will. And each act is this choice that somebody has to make. A choice to follow God, or a choice not to. So as we walk through this, we're going to look at these 3 acts. If you're a note taker, if you like to write things down, I know I left it blank in the bulletin, but you can write down Act 1, and then there'll be a choice. Act 2, there'll be a choice. And Act 3, there'll be a choice. But before we jump in, let's just jump into our own context for something. Maybe some of you are in the middle of this stressful situation right now. I doubt. Hopefully you have armed guards and swords and ears getting cut off, but you're in the middle of your own trial, your own pressure, your own stress. Maybe it's at home. Maybe it's in your family. Maybe it's in your marriage. Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's a friend or a neighbor. And you're living in the middle of this pressure moment right now. So as you pick up in John 18, you're like, I get it. I get it, because you're in the same thing. We all face these same choices. We all face these same stress. So let's pick it up, John chapter 18. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read some of the verses, make a few comments, then we'll move on, and we'll just kind of work our way through John 18 with these three things. Pick it up with me in John chapter 18, starting with verse 1. We're going to read through 11. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew this place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to him, "Whom do you seek?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So he asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said, I told you, it's me. Aaron, he's got the name tag on, right? It's me. I'm the guy you're looking for. So if you seek me, let these men go. This was to fulfill the word as spoken, of those whom you had gave me, I lost not one. Then Simon Peter, good old Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. By the way, this is the only time Malchus ever makes it in the Bible. He has the dubious frame of saying, I made it in the Bible for getting my ear cut off. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" So Act 1 here, verses 1 through 11. If you're a note-taking kind of person, you can write down control versus submit. Because that's what's going on here. Control, the sin of control versus a response of submission. The opening line here in verse 1, when Jesus had spoken these words, he's referring back to chapter 17. The NIV says, when he had finished praying. That was chapter 7, literally. On my Bible, turn the page back. Jesus just got done. Jesus just got done, said amen, and then we pick up the action in verse 18. Now, one thing to note when we read these stories is that these stories, verses 18 and on, are really rarities in our Bible. Now, we know there's 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They all tell basically the same story, right? But if you have this like 5-column chart, and in the first column are all the stories named, birth, resurrection, death, feeding the 5,000, turning water into wine, doing this. You start listing all the things Jesus did. Then you put a check mark if that story shows up in Matthew, if that story shows up in Mark, Luke, or John. If you did that, if you put a check mark, then what happens here, almost never is there a check mark in all 4. There's just not a lot of things that are recorded in all 4 of the Gospels, except for what we're reading right now and on through the end of the book. When you get to this point, this bingeable moment, suddenly all 4 of the Gospels have it. That's about the only time. It happens a few other times. John the Baptist, baptism of Jesus, feeding the 5,000. Peter talking about you are the Christ, his profession of faith. But other than that, never, except for here. That's just how important these are. Now, each gospel has a few unique facts about these stories. They all have their thing. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all 3 talk about a kiss. If you've read these stories before, there's a kiss that Judas does. That's how they know who the person is. John doesn't give us that. But yeah, these stories show up in all 4 Gospels. So in this opening story, look at verse 2 with me. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Hang on to this because I think it's critical. Jesus went to the place he always goes to, the same place. Now, if I've learned anything from watching like crime drama on TV, and isn't that the perfect place to learn about law enforcement? If I've learned anything, when you think somebody's following you and going to arrest you, or you're going to get in trouble, or somebody's stalking you, the first thing you learn to do is alter up your routine, right? Like, don't go to the same coffee house, don't take the same route to work, do something different or whatever, because the stalker is going to find you because you always go to that place. You always leave your house at 8:01 and get to work and do something different, but not Jesus. Now, Jesus knew what was going on. He absolutely knew what was going on, but look in verse 2. He went to the place that he often met with his disciples. Jesus went to the same place he went to. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't altering a route. He knew the guards, the crucifixion, the trial, everything that was coming. He knew Judas would easily find him here. Like this would be the most obvious place to look. And yet Jesus still went there. And I think it's a critical point. You see it again in verse 4. Skip down just a couple verses. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen, knowing everything that's going to happen, he knew exactly what was going to be said. He said, "Who do you seek?" They said, "Jesus." And what does he say? No clue. Haven't seen the guy. He says, "That's me. I'm the guy you want. I'm not hiding. I'm not running away. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm the guy you're looking for." Nothing's a surprise to him. Jesus says, "I am he." He says it 2 or 3 times. I'm he. I'm he. And in verse 8, "I told you, I am he." Now you're thinking, why does this matter? Could just hang on to it. Same place he always went, not hiding. Same thing. Jesus says, "Here I am. I'm the guy." So then look then at verse 10. Then Simon Peter, again, good old Simon. Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. Simon's response, Peter's response was just the opposite. He jumped to action and pulled out his sword ready to fight. And John doesn't really tell us how many people were there. And if we piece together the stories, we're not totally sure if it's a Roman group, which might mean like 100, or if it was just some people from the high priests. One of the Gospels says they had clubs, literally clubs with them. So we're not sure, but there's a lot of people there. There's a big group. It'd be like me pulling out a sword, defending against all of you. It's just silly. But good old Peter said he's going to do something about it. Peter's going to be in charge. He's going to fix it. He jumps to action immediately to try to control the situation and make it work the way he wanted it to work. And to be honest, Peter's trap is one I think we all fall into from time to time. It's that sin of control. We say to ourselves, if I work hard enough, study enough, think enough, act enough, do enough, if I just work hard enough, I can fix it. I can control it. It's the belief that it's my job to fix, control, and to make the outcome come out the way I want. I feel like I'm going to just stereotype men and women here a little bit, but I feel like I'm a guy, I put this together. All 3 of these, all 3 I'm going to go through speak to my maleness a lot. I feel that a lot as a guy, that it's my job to control the outcome, to fix the problem, to make things go well. And that's what Peter did. But look at Jesus' response, verse 11. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath." Now look what he says. "Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" He's telling Peter, it's not my job to control the outcome. It's my job to submit to the Father. While Peter took out his sword and cut off an ear, willing to fight the entire crowd, Jesus' response was one of faith, one of submission. God, whatever you want. I don't have to control the situation. I don't have to fix it. I was willing to calmly accept whatever God gave him. Submit and trust God versus take control. I was listening to you, this isn't in my notes, but I was listening as you were giving some of your testimonies at the beginning with Pastor Tim. 6 months ago, actually closer to 9 months ago, but 6 months ago I had surgery. 3 months prior to that, I got this diagnosis of stage 2 melanoma cancer. And stage melanoma gets graded up to 4 stages, and I was right in the middles. And had to have surgery 6 months ago. I'm doing fine, except for some scars that are good because they help me deal with my vanity. And having to go to doctors forever. The gift that keeps on giving is cancer. I have to have 3-month checkups for 5 years. But if you've ever been through something like that, listening to stories of sickness, you realize just how little control we really do have, right? I really can't control this thing. I've been working hard to stay in shape and be in shape at my age in life. I run some 5K and 10K races for fun. I'm in the best shape I've been in. I do things like that. And yet I have zero control over the cancer in my life. Zero. I just can't. But yet somehow I think the rest of my life I can control. Work hard, try hard, think hard, just get up early and get it done. Fix the problems. Now, the real question before we jump into Act 2 is, which one are you? When faced with hard, difficult, trying situations, what is my first response? Do I respond by powering up, getting it done, or do I respond with a submission to God? Do I jump into this fix-it mode like Peter is doing, or do I respond with trust and submission? And there's nothing wrong with hard work. I like getting up early. But what's my response? What's your response when faced with pressure? Do I pull my sword and get it done and try to control it, or do I respond and say, God, I'll drink the cup that you've given me? Let's move on to kind of what I'm calling Act 2. Act 1 is this move between submission and control. Do I try to control it, or am I willing to submit? Submission, control. Act 2 is Peter's denial. Act 2 is Peter's denial. I'm going to pick it up in verse 15. Okay, I'm going to skip a few verses, but you'll all find me. Verse 15, chapter 18. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside the door, so the other disciple who was known to the high priest went out and spoke to the servant girl, who kept watch at the door, and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You're not one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. I'm going to skip down to verse 25. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, "You also are not one of the disciples, are you?" He denied it and said again, "I am not." One of the servants, the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, related to Malchus, said, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it, and at once a rooster crowed. If you follow your Gospels, Jesus had predicted that you would deny me 3 times. Again, if you're a kind of a note-taking person, you want to write down, you could write down reputation versus transparency. Reputation versus transparency, because that's what's going on here. Managing my reputation versus being transparent. So here's Jesus gets taken away to the high priest to be questioned. And there's kind of 2. If you read if you read verses 12, 13, 14, the one I skipped over, there's Annas and Caiaphas. So Annas had been high priest, but now Caiaphas was his son-in-law. But Annas still had all the power. It gives you a clue of where the high priest state was, because it's really all about this family, Annas and his family. He installed Caiaphas because the Romans liked him better. So Jesus is taken away to be questioned. Then we pick up the story in verse 15. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. If you read the book of John, there's at least 5 to 7 times John refers to him as third person. Matter of fact, John, I don't think ever refers to himself by name in his own gospel. He always talks about another disciple, or sometimes in his humility, the disciple who Jesus loved, like I was his favorite. But there's at least 5 times he talks about himself, but he always says this other disciple. So this is John, most likely, talking here. Again, all the details seem to point that way. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple, me, John, the writer. And then it comes up with this. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard. So Jesus is getting grilled by all these guys. These 2 people are walking in, and the one was, and here's the word, known to the high priest. Again, this is important, so hang on to it. So now we know this other disciple, this one who is John, knew the people inside. So he comes back, talked to the servant girl, and was able to bring Peter inside because John was known. People knew who he was. Okay, it's going to be critical in our story. As they were walking in, the servant girl asked, down in verse 16, but Peter stood outside the door. The other disciple came and got him. The servant girl who had kept watch at the door and brought Peter in, the servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You also are not one of them, are you? You are not one too, are you?" And again, it's a simple little word that word also or and. It's a critical word. Because remember, the servant girl knew John, right? And apparently she knew one thing about John. She knew John was a follower of Christ. Because she looks at Peter, who she doesn't know, and says, you also are one, right? And there's a simple little 3-letter Greek word in there called kai, K-A-I. And it just means and, or also. The simple conjunction called kai. She knew about John. Apparently it was obvious that this is John, he follows Christ. Everybody knew that. And now she's looking at Peter and going, and you're one too, right? You're one of those people. And Peter says, nope, not me. And the question we got to ask is why? I mean, he's standing right there with John. He's standing right there with his friend John, who everybody knows. The servant girl knows him. Everybody knows he's a follower of Christ. And here's Peter. She goes, and you're one also. Kai, also. And Peter says, no, not me. I'm not one of them. Right in front of John, by the way. And the servant girl, and everybody else. Why? And he's lying, telling them, I'm not one of them. Why did he do it? But before we jump in, it gets better or worse. So you jump forward a few verses. Verse 18, now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. And they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming. Skip all the way down now to verse 25. We're just skipping over a few. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming. Again, the Greek word repeated time and time, kai, standing and warming, doing both together. So they said to him, verse 25, you also are not one of his disciples, are you? Like again, they say. And again, he's standing there with other people. He's standing there with his buddy John. Maybe like me standing there with Pastor Aaron. He's going, you're a Christ follower, right? You're also not one of them. He denied it and said, I am not. Verse 26, one of the servants of the high priest. Here's where it just gets, I think, out of control. Like, how can you keep going with this story? If you've ever lied, maybe when you were much younger, you spun a story to your parents about what really happened. But once you get going with this story, you just got to stick with it no matter how ridiculous, you're sounding. Anybody ever done it? Okay, maybe not you. Yeah. He denied and said, I am not one of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had just cut off. Like, just cut off. Hours ago, maybe? Oh, you don't know, but recently. She goes, hey, did I not see you in the garden with him? Like, I saw you in the garden, you cut my cousin's ear off, dude. Again, Peter denied it, and at once a rooster crowed. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke add in a little more detail here to say not only did he deny it, he kind of called down curses on himself. Now, it doesn't mean he cussed. It's more of this Jewish contractual way of saying, if I'm lying, let me be destroyed, kind of this. He called down these curses to just intensify. And now again, he continues it for a third time, even in front of the relative. He says, I saw you in the garden, you cut off my ear. How could I get that wrong? And Peter just says, nope, not me. He makes this oath. If I'm lying, you can cut my, maybe he said, hey, if I'm lying, you can cut my ear off too. Like that would be appropriate there. Yeah, if I'm lying, he's doing whatever he can to not be associated with followers of Jesus, even to the point of calling down curses on himself. And he's doing it right in front of his buddy John, who they had lived together for a couple of years. Now, before we move on to the kind of the third story, let's just stop and look at ourselves. Who am I more like in the third act? Peter or John? Peter was all about reputation management, with what those around him thought about him or how he was perceived. And the question is, when or where do I do the same? It's easy to give in to fear over honesty. Our fear of being found out makes us hide a little bit of ourselves. I mean, it goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. Adam and Eve were afraid, and what did they do? They hid from God, like there's a good idea. God will never find me behind these bushes. They didn't want to get found out. They were afraid that if they really let people see them, people would know the truth. That I don't have it all together. That I'm not doing fine. You ask the average person, how you doing? And you'll get the answer, I'm doing fine. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, says that almost 50,000 people died by suicide in the past year. If you do the math, which I did, that's about one suicide every 11 minutes. That means 3 or 4 people will have killed themselves during this message in the U.S. So we're obviously not doing fine as a culture. I mean, it's just, we're not. We live in this Instagram culture, right? Where the pictures and the photos got to be all perfect and the filters got to make us look good, make us look like we have happy marriages, great kids, well-paying jobs, we're satisfied, happy, great churches, no problem. Everything is good. And just like Peter, we deny. Don't let the truth come out. So let me just ask you, before we move on to the third story, who are you? Who are you at work? Who are you at home? Who are you at school? Who are you when you're out with your friends? Or maybe the most challenging, who are you when no one's looking? Reputation management versus authentic transparency. Am I the same person? I meet with a group of men on Monday mornings for a Bible study. Am I the same guy Monday morning at 6 a.m. with that group of men as I am Monday night when I go watch a game with a different group of friends when I watch the NCAA finish up? Am I the same person? Peter was all concerned about reputation management, making sure John apparently was open, transparent. Everybody knew who he was. Third act, jumping forward, John chapter 18, we're going to pick it up in verse 28. 28 through the end of the chapter. Let me read them and then we'll make a few comments. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning, so you follow the progression. When Peter was denying cutting off the ear, it was the middle of the night. So we're only hours away when he denied it. Now it's the next morning, as best we can tell. It was early morning. They themselves had not entered the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. We can go into that some other time about being defiled. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Do you catch the irony? What's the crime? What do you mean? If this guy didn't commit a crime, why would we bring him here? But Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge by your own law." The Jews said for him, "It is not law for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Like, are people telling you what to say? Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? I don't know what you're talking about. Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not from this world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you're saying you're a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to me." Pilate said to him in somewhat infamous words, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So you don't want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" They cried out, "Not this man, just Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. And then we all know how the story goes after that. So if you kind of pick up what's going here, and again, if you want to write down the big sin here is what I call the sin of passivity, or being passive, the sin of being passive. If Act 1 was all about the sin of control and our desire to control and fix things, and Act 2 was all about this reputation management, Act 3 is all about passivity. You can sum it up in two words: who cares? Who cares? Look at what's getting set up here. The Jewish leaders bring Jesus to Pilate. Pilate starts off with this obvious question, like, what's the problem? What's the accusation? They have a discussion about Jesus. Then look down at verse 31 with me. Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves." So Pilate says he doesn't want to decide. He doesn't want a piece of this. He knows this is going nowhere good. And just like in our other acts, this is critical. Don't forget this. Pilate's first reaction isn't what's right or what's wrong. His first reaction isn't to kind of figure out the truth. He doesn't care. He just wants his first reaction with, you guys deal with it. Why are you even bringing him to me? So hang on to that. Jump down to verse 35 then. The second time that Pilate speaks, same question. Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? I don't know what you're talking about. Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Same thing. These people brought you, must have done something, right? But Jesus in his response is on a total different plane. Like, he's not even answering the questions. It's like two separate conversations. I mean, Jesus is coming back and we miss what's going on here. I think Jesus is going somewhere different. Jesus isn't arguing his case. He's not trying to tell people, hey, I'm innocent. He's not giving facts. He's not calling witnesses. He's not saying, hey, bring my boys in. They'll tell you I haven't done anything wrong, you know. He's not doing any of this. He's talking about kingdoms and truth and those who believe the truth. I mean, Jesus is taking this final moment and he's trying to evangelize Pilate. Like, he's talking to Pilate about kingdoms and truth. In verse 37, he says, I have come into this world to bear witness to the truth. Like, I've come to tell people about me. That's what I'm doing here. Jesus is committed to telling Pilate about the kingdom. He's sharing the gospel with him. Faced with the very real threat of death, not just the threat, the reality, we know what's coming. What's Jesus doing? He's committed to his message, and he's evangelizing Pilate. And finally, skip all the way down to verse 38. After hearing all this stuff about kingdoms and truth and giving witness to the truth, how does Pilate respond? Does he delve into the case? Does he get more facts? Does he ask for witnesses? Verse 38, Pilate said to him, what is truth? Now, the statement, what is truth, a lot of people kind of spend a lot of time on this. I finished a master's a while ago. I have a master's degree in philosophy, and I love talking about truth. And this kind of, people have spun off on this whole what is truth question. Is this some metaphysical, big, like, what is truth? And let's have a philosophical discussion. And I think it's missing the whole point. I don't think Pilate's diving into the nature of truth or what makes something's truth. Pilate's question, I think, is the equivalent of a teenage eye roll combined with the word whatever. Anybody had parents of teenagers and gotten that? Yeah. I have 3 grown kids, so yeah. I tell them, like, you just get done with this thorough explanation about why it's probably not a good idea to set your curfew at 2 o'clock a.m. Like, that's not an acceptable curfew. And you get the whatever comment. Like, whatever. If you've ever been whatevered in your life, you get it. It's what Pilate's doing here. I mean, that's what he's doing. Verse 38. It's kind of like he's responding with this whatever. This kind of like, okay, fine. Verse 38, Pilate said, what is truth? And so you'd think he'd let him go. But verse 38, after he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and said, I find no guilt in him. Like, there's nothing wrong with this guy. So I'm going to set him free. That's what any normal person would do. But look at his next 2 words. But you have a custom. Pilate just doesn't care. I mean, he just doesn't care. He just wants out of this situation. He doesn't want to be involved. He wants out. He doesn't want to ruffle feathers. He's scared that if he talks one way or the other, people will get mad at him. It might not work out. He just wants to do the whatever and walk away. And in Matthew 27, the equivalent story, we know he washes his hands. He washes his hands of the whole thing and says, I'm out. You guys deal it. Now, he's really not, but it's kind of like this backing away, saying it's not my problem. I'm scared, so I don't want to get into the middle of this debate. And he walks away. And just like in the previous act, we can trace this all the way back to Genesis. Pilate's sin of passivity, of whatevering, if you will, is the fundamental sin we see in Adam. Genesis chapter 3, verse 6 says Eve was there. She took an apple. She ate it. And then you know what she did? She gave some to her husband. And it says, who was with her. And he ate it. Now you got to ask, what did Adam do in that moment? I mean, he could have said, hey, honey, hey, love of my life, do you really think eating this apple is a good idea? I mean, I think God said not, right? I mean, that's what any rational person would do, but not Adam. The Eric Hall translation of the Bible says, she gave some to her husband who was with her and did nothing. Those words aren't in there, but I think it's implied. Adam didn't do anything. He was too scared that if he had this conversation with Eve, it wasn't going to go well. She might get mad at him. And he valued calm at home over walking into a difficult conversation. Does this sound at all familiar? I mean, it's my life over and over. To the best of our knowledge, Adam was absolutely passive. To borrow from Pilate, Adam washed his hands of the whole thing. He was passive, indifferent. I meet with a group of men, like I said, on Monday mornings. We study the Bible and try to grow together. They did a study a while ago called Authentic Manhood. And the study has three kind of basic premises. I won't walk you through them all. But the first statement says, reject passivity. As a man, I want to reject passivity. Here's what the study says when talking about Adam on this first point. He, Adam, passively stood there while his wife was under attack by Satan. In a moment when he could have spoken up and stepped into the situation and acted with courage to protect his wife, and might I say, to protect the entire human race, he just stood there. He just stood there. And men and women, we've been living in Adam's shadow ever since. I mean, we have. Not just men, all of us. We're living in Adam's shadow. You see it in Pilate dismissively washing his hands and saying, what is truth? I don't care. It was easier not to be involved than to step into a difficult pressure situation. So before we move on, one last look at our own lives. Where am I still living in Adam's shadow? Or to stay with our text, where am I living in Pilate's shadow? And for me, as I've already said, I see this a lot in my marriage. My kids are grown, so I don't have to actively parent them quite as often anymore. But man, I know there's times where I need to have conversations. I know I need to talk about something. And it's just easy. It's easier to be passive. I mean, it's just easier to stay passive. I think we all do it. We know we need to have that conversation in our marriage, in our families, at work, here at the church maybe. We know we need to talk to these people. We know we need to enter into that. We need to do something, but instead we become like Pilate. We wash our hands, dismissively roll our eyes, and say, whatever, not my problem. And we live in Adam's shadow. And we remain passive. We're indifferent. I read this book a while ago that took military sayings and applied each of them to a leadership principle, what it means to be a leader. And one of the sayings was run to the sound of gunfire. Like when you hear guns go off, our military or whatever, your first, other people, you want them running towards that noise, not away from that noise, right? To do something about it. So the question is, what do I do when the guns fires? Not literally, when the metaphorical guns are going off. Do I lean into that? Have a hard conversation, talk to people lovingly, but lean into it? Or do I live in Adam's shadow and remain passive? even when it's hard, even when there's chaos around me, what do I step into it rather than being passive? So that's my take on John 18, kind of this 3-act play. 3 stories here, 3 acts. Act 1 is Jesus and his arrest. Jesus responds to pressure with submission and trust, while Peter has to control it. What's God calling me to trust in? Act 2 is Peter's denial. Peter's focused on his own standing, his own reputation. I called it reputation management, or the Instagram temptation if you're into social media, where everything looks perfect. Where am I more concerned about my own reputation and image than I am about following Christ? And Act 3, finally, Pilate's living completely in Adam's shadow, being passive, washing his hands and saying, I don't care, I'm out. Where is God calling me to reject passivity and lean into the whirlwind, to run to the sound of the gunfire? Let me pray, then we'll sing and worship and be done. God, you are good all the time. And God, I'm grateful for Jesus stepping into the chaos that was my life, that he ran to the sound of my garbage and wasn't passive. I'm grateful. God, I pray we could learn to submit to you, to reject passivity, and to live lives of humble authenticity, even if it makes us look a little screwed up at times. God, thanks for this church. Thanks for the chance to be with them and make friends and share a meal together. I just pray your blessing on the leaders here. Pray your blessing on this church. May your name be glorified because of the faithfulness of these individuals. Just pray all these things in your name. Amen.